Today we're talking about simplifying square roots of negative numbers, which are imaginary numbers. Has anyone ever heard of imaginary numbers before? I think I briefly talked about it in here. Okay, so what happens is we have real numbers and then we have imaginary numbers. Okay, so it used to be back in Algebra 1 when you had the square root of a negative number, you just said the answer was no solution, and that was it. Well, now in Algebra 2, we are going to have a solution to that problem. So what happens is whenever you have a negative under a square root, and I say square root is because a square root, there's also cubed roots, right? When we get to cubed roots, it's going to be a little bit different. But whenever you have a square root with a negative number, you take the negative out, and the negative ends up becoming an I. And so we have I root 9, and then 9 breaks down to what? 3 and 3, so I have a group of 3's. And so my answer for this ends up being 3I. Because you pull the group out and you have the I. So it's 3I. So when you go down here, imaginary numbers, anytime you have the square root of negative 1, which really this is the square root of negative 1 times 9, right? So we just take the negative out and it becomes an I. If you have I squared, it equals negative 1. You need to remember these. Anytime you have a negative under a square root, it becomes I. And then I squared is negative 1. Okay? So we're going to go through and have some examples. So the first thing on example 1 that you want to do is take the negative out. And when you bring the negative out, it becomes a I. So I have I root 81, and then 81 breaks down to, so my answer is, okay, yes? All right, example 2, what do you think we're going to do? Okay, you have the parentheses, so I have to square everything in here. Okay, so what is 3 squared? 9, and then we have I squared, but we learned that I squared is actually what? So this is really 9 times negative 1, which makes negative 9. Okay, why didn't you try example 3 on your own? Okay, so you should have multiplied 8 times 3 together, which makes what? 24. So you have 24I squared, but we know that I squared is actually what? So my answer is negative 24. Questions so far? Okay, on example 4. If you can simplify the roots, you want to, okay? So I need to always take care of that negative first. So the negative comes out and it becomes I root 5 times I root 20. At this point, if you wanted to break 20 down, you could, but we know that outsides multiply with outsides and insides multiply with insides, correct? So that means that we're going to end up with I squared root, and we have 5 times 20. And then 20 breaks down to, okay, and then 4 breaks down to, so we have a group of 2's and a group of 5's, and we bring those out, and what does that become? So we have 10I squared, but we know that I squared is what? So my answer is negative 10. So I would say that these problems are not super complicated, but some of you like to skip steps and rush through things, and that's usually when mistakes happen with these problems. So I would suggest kind of taking it step by step and slow, and you'll probably get it right. Any questions on 4 before we move on? All right, example 5. Why don't you try this one on your own if you haven't already? And if you get your answers, you could write them on your whiteboards, or I actually have new whiteboard sheets for you guys. I'll give them out here. So the whiteboards that I gave you, you're going to end up putting them in these sheet protectors, and everything will write and erase much better. They're not gonna fit? It should fit. I'm like, it's 8 by, like I took cardstock paper. If you end up needing to clean your whiteboard off, I have wipes for you guys who didn't using. We can pass them around. So you guys can share them. Can you guys share them? Yeah. So I don't run out. Okay, so there's a couple wipes that can be moved around the room. You have to kind of scrub them and clean them. Put them on your desk and... Okay, so back to this. If you got your answers, show me. Good. Yep. Yes, no. Okay. Okay, we're out of here at 46, right? Okay, good. Good, good. Yes. I can't see it. Check with Julia. Good. Yes, you got it. Good job. Okay, so the correct answer was 24I. The first thing we do is take the negative out, and we have 4I root 36. Okay, 36 breaks down to 6 and 6. So then we bring that group out, and we end up with 24I. All right, example 6. The first thing you always want to do is get rid of the negatives under the roots. Shh. So we bring the negative out. I have root 60 over I root 15. Okay, so first thing, get rid of that negative under the root. Okay, next, remember we talked about how roots and roots you can reduce and outsides of roots you can reduce? So can 15 and 60 reduce? Oh, you could divide by 5, but we could divide by 15. Right. So 15 goes into 60 how many times? 4. So that root 15 is gone because the square root of 1 is 1, right? So I now have root 4 over I. Are we all okay with that? Okay. What does I actually represent? You guys are... It represents the square root of negative 1. Are we allowed to have square roots in the denominator? No. So what do you think is the only way I can get rid of an I in the denominator? Multiply by an I, because we know that I times I is... No. I times I is... negative 1, because I squared is negative 1. Oh, but whatever I do to the top, I have to do the bottom, but I should have actually simplified the top. What does the top end up becoming?
2.
I'm going to take this away for a second. So I have 2 over I. And then you said that in order to get rid of the I denominator, I should multiply by another I. And whatever I do at the bottom, I have to do the top. So what do I have in my denominator? Good. 2I over negative 1. Because I squared, that's what I times I is, equals negative 1. You found that in the restroom? Okay, 2I over negative 1 is what? Negative 2I. You would just simplify to be this. Okay, are we good with 6? Okay, so number 7. Again, I always recommend that you reduce everything if you can first. So do we see anything we can reduce? Good. So 2 cancels out. 18 becomes 9. So I have 9 over I root 6. Can I reduce anything else? No. What's my problem with this? Good. I have an I and a root. So how am I going to get rid of that? Multiply by what? Good. I root 6 because we need to get rid of the I and the root. Okay. So I and I makes what? I squared, which is negative 1. So in my denominator, I have a negative 1 times, and then root 6 and root 6 is 6. So that ends up becoming negative 6. And on the top, I have, good, 9I root 6. And then can I reduce anything? Yes. So we get 3 on top and 2. So 3I root 6 over negative 2 is my answer. Okay, questions on that? Okay, I want you to now look at number 8 and 9. Tell me about the differences that you see between 8 and 9. Good. So yeah, so here the parentheses are under the root, and here the root is in the parentheses, right? So remember with order of operations, well, first of all, basically whatever's in parentheses, you need to take care of that first. Okay, so that means that before I do anything with the square root, I have to take care of this number right here. So what happens when I square negative 17? So this will end up becoming the square root of 17 squared, right? Because you square the negative, which becomes a positive, and we also square the 17. Which makes this answer what? 17. Very good. Now, on example 9, we have to take care of what's in the parentheses first. What am I going to have to do here? You have to take the negative out, and I get I root 17. Okay, there's nothing more I can simplify here, but we have the square on the outside. So I end up with I squared, right? And whenever you square a square root, it just becomes 17, but then when we simplify this, it's going to be negative 1 times 17, which is negative 17. So notice that these answers are not the same, right? Yes? It is. Maybe because you're saying the right thing, but you're wanting something different. So you're okay with this being I root 17, right? You're okay? All right. Okay, example 10. Yes. I'm going to explain it to you later because you missed like over half the notes. So, which is why I don't want to use restroom when we start notes. Okay, number 10. What will I do first? Good. The negative comes out and becomes an I. Anytime you have a negative under a square root, it comes out and becomes an I. Root 3. Okay? We're going to do the same thing over here with the 27, right? So we end up with I root 27. Can I break 27 down? To what? And 3 and 3. So I have a pair of 3's with a 3 left over. So when I write this, I have I root 3 plus 3I root 3. Are we all okay with that? Now, the only time you can add roots together is if they have the same root. And these both have the same root, don't they? And in front, this is really a 1. And so 1 plus 3 makes... And the only thing that we can't have is i's and roots in the denominator, but there are no i's and roots in the denominator here, so we're good. All right, and then you guys had a number 11 as well, right? Yes, you do. Okay. Number 11, it was the square root of negative 3 times negative 6. Okay. Now, you have to think of roots. It's like there are parentheses underneath it. You want to simplify in the root first if you can. So you're not going to take both of these negatives out because I can simplify this. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So what is this going to simplify to be? Good, the square root of 18. And then you're going to break that down. 9 and 2, 3 and 3. So my answer is 3 root 2. Okay? Any questions?